It all began with the silence. That's the irony I live with now. The cruel punchline to a joke I never want to hear again. I moved to the old house in the Alto de Gloria neighborhood of Curitiba, precisely for the quiet. I'm a freelance graphic designer, and the constant hum of my former downtown apartment, the traffic, the sirens, the neighbor's eternally barking dog, had become a creative poison. This house, a two-story relic from the 1950s with peeling white paint and a sprawling garden, was supposed to be my sanctuary, a place where my thoughts could finally stretch their legs. For the first 2 weeks, it was bliss. My name is Leo, and for the first time in my 32 years, I felt like a real adult. I had a mortgage, a garden I was comically inept at tending, and a whole floor dedicated to my work. I set up my studio in a spacious room on the ground floor, the one with the large bay window overlooking the overgrown rose bushes. The light was perfect. The silence was deep, restorative, the kind you can almost feel in your bones. I was in control, master of my meticulously quiet domain. My initial skepticism about anything beyond the explainable was a comfortable armor. Old houses creak, pipes gurgle, the wind howls. I had a rational explanation for everything. The first sound was easy to dismiss. It was late, almost 3 a.m., and I was hunched over my tablet, putting the finishing touches on a branding package for a new client. A faint scratching noise echoed from directly above my head. The attic. My mind, weary from hours of focusing on kerning and color palettes, immediately offered a solution. Rats, or maybe a squirrel that had found its way in. Annoying, but hardly supernatural. I made a mental note to buy some traps and call an exterminator if it persisted. I put on my headphones, cranked up some instrumental music, and drowned it out. Problem solved. But the house had other ideas. A few nights later, the scratching returned, but it was different. It was less frantic, more deliberate. It was accompanied by a soft, intermittent thump. Scratch, scratch, thump. I paused my work, took off my headphones, and listened. The house was dead quiet except for that sound from above. It sounded like someone was dragging a small, heavy piece of furniture an inch at a time. I rationalized again, the wood of the house settling in the cool night air. Tree branches scraping against the roof. But there was no wind that night. The air was unnaturally still, thick with the damp chill that Curitiba is famous for. I tried to ignore it, but the sound had planted a seed of unease. My sanctuary was being invaded by a question mark. The next day, armed with a powerful flashlight, I pulled down the folding ladder to the attic. The hatch creaked open, releasing a cloud of dust motes that danced in the beam of light and the stale, musty smell of forgotten decades. I poked my head in. It was exactly what you'd expect. A cavern of shadows, crisscrossed with heavy wooden beams, cluttered with old boxes and furniture draped in white sheets like slumbering ghosts. I scanned the floorboards with my light. No droppings, no nests, no signs of any infestation. I checked the roof from the inside. No branches were close enough to make that kind of noise. It was empty. It was still. That should have been reassuring. It wasn't. The emptiness felt wrong. It meant my easy explanations were wrong too. That week, the sounds evolved. The rhythmic thumping became more consistent, less random. It was a slow, soft, methodical beat. Thump, 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 thump. It was almost organic. I told my friend David about it over a beer. He was my designated skeptic, the voice of pure, unadulterated reason in my life. "Dude, it's an old house," he said, laughing. "You're just not used to it. It's probably the water pipes. Does it have a water tank up there?" "No, the tank is outside," I replied, feeling a bit foolish. "Then it's the wood contracting, or your imagination, fueled by too much coffee and not enough sleep. You wanted quiet, you got it. Now it's so quiet you can hear the house breathing. Just give it a name, make friends with it. Call it Casper the Creaky Joist." I wanted to believe him. I desperately clung to his logic. For a few days, every time I heard the thump-thump, I'd repeat his words to myself. "It's just the house. You're just tired." But the sound was changing again. It was synchronizing. Sometimes, when I'd stand perfectly still, listening, I could feel my own heart beating in my chest, and the thumping from the attic would seem to fall into the same rhythm. A slow, faint echo of my own pulse played back to me from the darkness above. That was the moment my comfortable armor of skepticism began to crack, and a primal, chilling fear started to seep through. My control was an illusion. The silence I had craved was not empty. It was listening. The illusion of control shattered completely the night I heard the whisper. The thumping had become a nightly companion, a dreadful lullaby I was learning to dread. But this was new. I was in bed, drifting in that fragile space between wakefulness and sleep, when a faint sound cut through the darkness. It was a dry, sibilant hiss, like leaves skittering across pavement, but it had shape. It almost formed a word. My name. Leo. I sat bolt upright, my heart hammering against my ribs. I strained my ears, listening to the suffocating silence of the house. Nothing. Had I dreamed it? It felt too real, too intimate, as if someone had whispered directly into my ear from a great distance. Sleep was impossible after that. My work began to suffer. I was distracted, irritable, and perpetually exhausted. The house no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a trap. The silence was a canvas, and something was slowly, methodically painting a portrait of my fear upon it. My casual annoyance turned into a desperate, gnawing obsession. I had to know. I started my investigation online, digging into the public records for the property. The house had only one previous owner since it was built in 1957, a man named Alistair Blackwood. He had died in the house in 1978. Cause of death, heart failure. He was a recluse, a clockmaker by trade. I went to the city library and spent hours scrolling through microfilm archives of the local newspaper from that year. I finally found it. A small, forgettable article buried in the back pages. Local artisan found deceased, the headline read. It mentioned that neighbors had called the police after not seeing him for several days and hearing a strange, incessant ticking coming from the home. The article concluded with a curious detail. A personal diary was found at the scene, but its contents were deemed unsettling and were not released. A clockmaker, ticking. My blood ran cold. The next step was the hardest. I had to talk to the neighbors. Most were new, but Mrs. Rosa, a sweet, white-haired lady who lived 2 houses down, had been there since the beginning. I found her tending to her hydrangeas. When I mentioned I lived in the old Blackwood house, her cheerful expression tightened. "Oh, the clockmaker's house," she said, her voice dropping. A sad, strange man Mr. Alistair was, especially after his wife, Eleanor, passed. He was never the same. "I've been hearing strange noises," I admitted, feeling my cheeks flush with embarrassment. She stopped pruning and looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and fear. "He was obsessed with time. After Eleanor died, he locked himself away in his workshop, in the attic. He told my late husband he was building something, not just a clock, something to fix things, to rewind what was lost." She leaned closer, her voice barely a whisper. "He said that if you could create the perfect rhythm, you could call back an echo. Be careful in that house, young man. Some places have memories, and some memories are hungry." Her words, cryptic and terrifying, were the final push I needed. That night, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. Fueled by a cocktail of terror and adrenaline, I pulled down the attic ladder with a resounding crash. I didn't just bring a flashlight this time. I brought a crowbar. The air that spilled out was colder than I remembered, carrying a faint metallic scent, like old blood or rust. I climbed into the darkness, my flashlight beam cutting a nervous path through the thick dust. And then I saw it. In the exact center of the attic, directly above my studio, sat a bizarre, nightmarish contraption. It was a grotesque fusion of art and madness, cobbled together from brass gears, copper wiring, intricate clock escapements, and polished mahogany. The entire assembly was shaped unmistakably like a human heart, about 3 feet tall. A long, sharp pendulum hung from its center, motionless. It was a metronome built by a madman. My light fell on an old, dusty workbench in the corner. In one of the drawers, tucked beneath a set of watchmaker's tools, was a small, leather-bound book. Alistair Blackwood's diary. My hands trembled as I opened it. The first pages were filled with elegant script, detailing his grief over Eleanor. But as the entries progressed, the writing became a frantic, obsessive scrawl. He wasn't building a time machine. His grief had twisted into a horrifying new belief. He wrote of esoteric texts, of chronomancy and sympathetic resonance. He believed he could build an artificial clockwork heart, a perfect vessel, and by setting it to the rhythm of his own grief, he could call back the echo of his wife's soul. The final entries were nearly illegible, written with a shaky hand. October 17th, 1978. It is complete. The chronomantic heart. I have tuned its beat to the memory of hers. Tonight, I will give it the spark. My own pulse will be the key. October 19th, 1978. Success. A terrible success. I heard it last night. A beat. Faint, but there. But it is not Eleanor. It is just the echo. A hollow rhythm without a soul. It is cold. It is empty. October 22nd, 1978. The beat is stronger. It mimics my own. I hear it in the walls now. It is learning. It is hungry. It has no life of its own, so it covets mine. It needs a beat to sustain itself. The final, terrifying entry was a single, spidery sentence. October 24th, 1978. It won't stop. It begs for my heart. It begs for mine. A wave of vertigo washed over me. I finally understood. The house wasn't haunted by a ghost. It was haunted by an absence. A rhythmic void. A malevolent echo of life given form by a grieving man's madness. It was anchored to the clockwork heart in the attic, and for 40 years it had lain dormant. Until I moved in. My life, my work, my heartbeat directly below its lair had woken it up. The thumping, the whispers, the mimicking of my pulse. It was learning me. It was feeding on me. And in that dusty, silent attic I was struck by the purest terror I have ever known. The terrifying, absolute certainty that I was not alone and that there was no easy escape. The knowledge changed everything. The entity, the echo as I began to call it, was no longer subtle. It was as if my discovery of the diary had been a formal invitation. The whispers were no longer indistinct. They were my own voice, twisted and distorted, calling my name from dark corners. Shadows in my peripheral vision seemed to pulse in time with my frantic heartbeat. The thumping was no longer confined to the attic. It was everywhere. I'd hear it from under the floorboards as I walked, a soft thump-thump matching my footsteps. I'd feel it vibrating through my pillow at night, a monstrous external pulse trying to sync with my own. I called David, my voice cracking with panic. I read him excerpts from the diary. I described the clockwork heart. His silence on the other end of the line was heavier than any argument. "Leo," he finally said, his tone laced with a careful clinical concern. "You're under a lot of pressure. This new house, the isolation. You're not sleeping. Your mind is playing tricks on you. A chronomantic heart? It sounds like something from a gothic novel. Please, man, you need to see someone. Get some rest." "It's real, David. I'm not crazy," I yelled, but I could hear the desperation in my own voice. I knew how I sounded. He made a few more placating remarks and promised to call me the next day. He was trying to help, but his disbelief was a wall between us. I was utterly, terrifyingly alone. My first instinct was to fight. If the clockwork heart was the anchor, I would destroy it. I grabbed a sledgehammer from the garage, my knuckles white, and stormed up to the attic. The moment I set foot on the top rung of the ladder, a wave of sickness and disorientation crashed over me. The air grew impossibly cold, stealing the breath from my lungs. The faint thumping erupted into a deafening cacophony, 1,000 invisible clocks ticking out of sync, the sound drilling directly into my skull. The shadows around the heart machine deepened, coalescing into a pulsing abyss that seemed to suck all the light and sound from the room. I was paralyzed, pinned by an unseen weight and a wave of pure psychic dread. The echo was protecting its anchor. I stumbled backward, falling down the ladder and slamming the hatch shut, the chaotic ticking still echoing in my mind. If I couldn't fight it, I would flee. I packed a bag, jumped in my car, and drove to a hotel in the city center. I checked into a room on the 10th floor, surrounded by the comforting noise of traffic and life. For a few hours it worked. I felt a sliver of hope. But around 2 a.m., I was jolted awake. Thump, thump. Thump, thump. It was slow, patient, and deliberate, and it was coming from the other side of my hotel room door. My blood turned to ice. It had followed me. The house was its anchor, but I was its focus, its tether. I spent the rest of the night huddled in a corner of the room, listening to that soft, persistent beat until the morning light finally drove it away. There was no escape. The terror was constant now, a low hum of anxiety beneath every waking moment. My mind began to fray at the edges. I saw the world through a thick fog of fear and sleep deprivation. Every clock was an enemy. The rhythmic tick of a turn signal, the drip of a faucet, the beat of a song on the radio, each one was a potential hook for the echo. I went through the house and took down all the clocks, stuffing them into a closet, but I couldn't stop the one in my own chest. My own heartbeat had become the sound of my personal monster, a constant reminder of the thing that was hunting me. I was becoming a prisoner in my own body, haunted from within. I hadn't slept for what felt like days. I was a ghost in my own house, pacing the halls, my body vibrating with caffeine and raw fear. The echo was stronger than ever. It no longer just mimicked me. It anticipated me. When my heart raced with panic, the thumping in the walls would accelerate to match it, a mocking, predatory rhythm. I was trapped in a feedback loop of terror. It fed on my life, my rhythm, and my fear was making it stronger. Alistair Blackwood had died of heart failure. The words from the newspaper article echoed in my head. It hadn't been a natural death. The echo had taken his heart. It had drained him of his rhythm, his life, until there was nothing left. And now, it wanted mine. In the deepest pit of my despair, a desperate, insane idea began to form. I couldn't destroy its anchor. I couldn't outrun its focus. I couldn't silence my own heart. But what if I could deafen it? What if I could drown it out? The echo fed on a singular, clear rhythm. Alistair's quiet, reclusive life had made him the perfect target. My own quiet sanctuary had done the same for me. The solution, then, was not silence. It was noise. A chaotic, a rhythmic, overwhelming cacophony. With the last of my strength, I dragged every sound-making device I owned into my studio, the room directly beneath the attic. 2 large speakers, my old stereo system, a couple of Bluetooth speakers, even an old clock radio. I ran extension cords across the floor, creating a tangled web of wires. I went to my small vinyl collection and pulled out the most chaotic, free-form jazz album I owned, a whirlwind of conflicting tempos and shrieking saxophones. This was it, my final, desperate gambit. I took a deep breath and climbed the ladder to the attic one last time. The air was glacial. The thumping was a physical force now, a monstrous, guttural pulse that shook the floorboards and rattled my teeth. In the center of the room, the darkness around the clockwork heart was no longer just a shadow. It was a shifting, formless mass of blackness, pulsing in time with the deafening beat. As I stared, it began to stretch, to reach for me, a tendril of pure void. It was coming for me. I didn't wait. I scrambled down the ladder, ran to the stereo, and slammed the power button. I cranked every volume knob to its maximum. A wall of sound erupted through the house. The speakers blasted the chaotic jazz. The radios spewed static and snippets of talk shows, all at once. It was a tidal wave of sonic chaos, a war of frequencies with no discernible beat. Upstairs, the monstrous thumping faltered. The house groaned as the singular malevolent rhythm fought against the onslaught of noise. The echo was confused, overwhelmed, unable to lock onto my heartbeat amidst the sensory storm. The oppressive, cold presence in the house thinned, receding like a dying tide. It wasn't gone. I could still feel it, a faint, dissonant hum beneath the noise, but it was dormant, drowned. I survived the night. I survived the house. The next day, I called a real estate agent and put the house on the market, selling it at a staggering loss to a development company that I prayed would tear it down. I live in a small apartment downtown now, surrounded by the very noise I once tried to escape. But I am not the same man. The silence is gone forever, and with it, my peace. My apartment is never quiet. I have a fan running constantly, music playing from a speaker, the TV on, even when I'm not watching. Silence is no longer an absence of sound. For me, it is a presence. It is a terrifying, listening void. Sometimes in the dead of night, during a momentary lull in the city's hum, I think I can hear it. A faint, distant beat. The echo of a clockwork heart, sleeping in a quiet, empty house. Waiting. Waiting for the world to fall silent, just for a moment, so it can remember the rhythm of my heart. I escaped, but I am forever marked, a witness to the chilling truth that the most terrifying voids are not empty at all. They are just waiting for a heartbeat to follow.